growing up, I would go straight to the agony aunt section of my mum's Women's Day magazine. Skip ahead, and I'm now a counsellor with 20 years experience, here to bring my best advice to answer your questions and challenges. Each fortnightly episode covers 3 listener questions organised by theme, and I'll give you my candid, honest answers, all designed to help you find a way forward. If you've got a question you'd like me to answer, there are a few easy ways to send it in. You'll find a question box on my Instagram stories every Tuesday, or if you'd like to ask your question anonymously, you can find a link on my Instagram bio, in the show notes, or at charlottecummings.nz. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Ask Charlotte, part of the Feel Better podcast. Welcome along to this episode of Ask Charlotte. I put up a question box on my Instagram asking what you wanted me to cover in this episode, and overwhelmingly the selection was for me to talk about your relationship with yourself. Then I put up another question box asking for your specific questions, and I have got so many questions to choose from and some really great content to share with you today, so I can't wait to get into this episode. We've got 3 questions all along that same theme of relationship with yourself. So let's dive in. The first question is, how do I speak to myself in a kinder way? This is such a good question and something I'm really keen to break down for you and explain more. One of the key things I think when it comes to learning to speak in a kinder way to yourself is actually breaking the habit of speaking to yourself in a negative way in the first place. Many people just aren't aware of the boundaries that we can have around our thinking. That it is perfectly okay to say to yourself, I'm not having that. I'm not tolerating that. Thanks for that, brain, whatever you've dished up to me, but I don't like it and I don't want more of that. Thank you very much. I actually learned a great lesson around this when we got a puppy. I realised that there was this great difference between how I talked to my children and how I spoke to the puppy, and that it was sometimes easier to get better behaviour out of the puppy because I was short and I was sharp and I was a little bit gruff with it. No, that is absolutely not acceptable. Don't you growl at me. Don't bark now. Don't snarl at that other person across the road. I was short, sharp, and direct when I was training him. And sometimes I think we need to speak to our minds a little bit like a puppy that we are trying to train, where we're direct about what it is that we will tolerate and what it is that we don't want. So telling your mind to shush is perfectly acceptable. I think where a lot of people get stuck in speaking to themselves in not such a kind way is we allow it. Now, that all sounds nice, but how do you do that? Well, one of the key things is to build in some circuit breakers. So when you find yourself speaking to yourself in a way that is not all that kind and supportive, you stop yourself and go, I'm not doing this right now. I'm going to go and do something different. So if you're at work, you might get up and go for a walk around the block. You might go to the bathroom and run your wrists under some nice icy cold water. You might go and make a cup of tea. You might go and chat with someone. If you're at home, you might go and have a warm bath. You're going to go and do something that gets you out of that zone where this pattern of ruminating is allowed to continue. So the number one thing, if you want to speak more kindly to yourself, is that you need to break the habit of speaking to yourself in a negative way. Put in place those circuit breakers so you're doing something different. The next thing I think is really important, and sometimes we forget about this when it comes to change, is we need to be really aware of our motivation to change. Why are we trying to change this in the first place? A great question you can ask yourself is, who benefits if I learn to speak to myself in a kinder way? Is it your children, your spouse, your friends, and the people around you who will all then also be spoken to in a kinder way? Or will there be other options that are available to you in your life if you learn to speak to yourself in an encouraging way? What is the best thing that might come about from speaking to yourself in a kinder, more supportive and encouraging way? Who benefits from this? What are the options that might become available to you? One of the key things I often say to parents when it comes to their own relationship with themselves and how they speak to themselves is how you speak to yourself. That internal voice does get projected onto your children. They do pick up on whatever it is that you say to yourself, your beliefs about yourself. They become your child's inner voice. Now, for some parents, that is really confronting, and hopefully it's motivating. How you speak to yourself becomes how your child speaks to themselves. So get motivated about as how it is at the moment, how you want things to be for them for a long time into the future until they become able to make this change for themselves. So get clear on your motivation. Why does this matter in your life? The other thing is you actually need to know what to say to yourself if you're going to try to speak to yourself in a kinder way. Now, what matters here is learning how to deeply reassure yourself. I'm not a big fan of affirmations. I'm not a big fan of just positive thinking your way through an issue. When it comes to speaking kindly to ourselves, we need to know how to deeply reassure ourselves in the space where it matters the most. So if you're someone who feels inadequate or not good enough, what you say to yourself is going to be along those lines. If you're worried about failing or disappointing people, your reassurances to yourself and how you speak to yourself in a kinder way needs to be on that theme. So think about, what is it that I most want to hear? If someone came along and said something absolutely ideal to me right now that made me feel deeply reassured, what would they say? What would the most kind and supportive friend say to you in this moment? Or how would you speak to a best friend or child and coach them through this issue? So often we actually do know what to do when it comes to how to speak to ourselves, because this is how we speak to other people. We just need to be able to turn those skills back around and use them for ourselves. My other encouragement to you, if you struggle with speaking kindly to yourself, is go as deeply into this as you can. If you haven't listened to my episode on unbearable feelings, this would be a great thing to explore. Or if there are challenges for you around self-esteem, it's probably time to do some work around who you are, liking yourself, and building that actual base of what is it that I've got to stand on when it comes to why I would want to speak kindly to myself. If your opinion of yourself is really low, that is often where speaking to yourself in an unkind way comes from. So what work do you need to do around healing your own issues, your own concept of yourself, your relationship with yourself, and how you view yourself? Because that all matters when it comes to how kindly we will then speak to ourselves. Speaking kindly to yourself is not about affirmations. It's not all just about pumping yourself up and having a little moment of feeling good. If you do not believe what you are saying to yourself, that is a big problem. So maybe this is an opportunity to do the work around your self-esteem and the healing that will allow you to speak more kindly to yourself because you value yourself in the first place. So remember, break the habit, work on the motivation, think about building the picture of what you actually need to say to yourself based on what you'd say to a friend, and do the work if it's time to upgrade your view of yourself. So the next question that has come through is, how do I heal from purity culture? Now, for some people, you'll know what this means, and for others, you'll be thinking, what on earth is that about? So just to explain, purity culture is a set of ideals around sex and sexuality that often is found in certain church environments, is sometimes found in particular families, but there are a whole lot of ideals around gender, around sexuality, around abstinence, around the relationship between men and women. And purity culture can have a really strong influence on the development of people's relationship with their body and relationships with other people. The first thing I want to say about the journey of recovering from purity culture is you need to think about deconstructing, looking at what it was that you were taught. So what were you taught about sex, about desire, about pleasure, about men and women? What were you taught about gender differences and relationships? It can be helpful to actually get a piece of paper out or start a document on your computer and explore what were the things that I was taught, what was presented to me by my family or by the community or church that I was part of. And then that gives you an opportunity to start to think for yourself. What is it that I think about all of those things? Each of those things that you've noted down in each of those areas, what's your view on that personally? And what's the gap between what you were taught and what it is that you actually believe for yourself? When it comes to recovering from purity culture, one of the things I love the most is this idea of a personal sexual ethic. So we all have beliefs when it comes to these topics, and then it's important for us to consider, how are we going to conduct ourselves in a way that lines up with our beliefs when it comes to this area of our lives. The concept of developing a personal sexual ethic is really empowering for people who have had particular views really rammed into their lives, where you've been told what to think. It is so empowering to go, do you know what? You get to form your own opinions of this. Now, I fully recognise that in some environments, there is a lot of effort to teach people around this in a way that comes from a good perspective that is trying to be healthy or helpful. And the reality, though, is that sometimes that crosses a line of being controlling, of being dictating, and forming some really unhealthy responses from people. And it can get problematic because it can create some really unhealthy responses within our lives. A really key question to ask, and this is quite confronting, is why did my family or church want me to think this way in the first place? How did it serve them or benefit them? So one of the more sinister things about purity culture is that sometimes those ideals that you are taught are more in the interests of the community that you're part of than your own interests as an individual. Something I see a lot in working with clients who have come out of high purity culture environments is that they're really disconnected from their bodies. And that is not all about sex and pleasure and desire. That can even be about things like responding to themselves when they're sick or listening to their physical limits. There is a sense of we need to deny our bodies. We need to be disconnected from our bodies and not listen to what our bodies are saying to us. And so often, the recovery around purity culture so often has an important element around your relationship with your body and not just in the area of sex. The other thing I think is really refreshing if you're recovering from purity culture is to think about the people that you surround yourself with. Maybe you need some people around you who have some different ideas and ideals when it comes to relationships. It can be really healthy to put yourself in different spaces and places while you're working out what it is that you think, what you believe, and how you're then going to conduct yourself. There are heaps of resources in this area, so my other encouragement is to dive into the podcasts, books, and content that's online where other people are sharing their stories around purity culture. There is so much that you can read and listen to and absorb on this that'll be a real encouragement in your own journey of recovery. And I want to do a shout out here to my friend and colleague Meg Cowan, who is an amazing New Zealand-based sexologist who's got some great resources around recovery from purity culture. She's walked her own journey through this, and Meg's developed some great offers to help people if they're walking through this themselves. And so the third question I'm going to cover for this episode today is from someone who wants to know, what do I do when it comes to time away from my children and spouse? This is such a dilemma, especially for parents with young children, because those little moments of time that you get are so very precious and it can just feel overwhelming. What am I going to do with this time? We can feel elements of guilt. We can feel like there's this list of things I should be doing that maybe will make a difference to how I feel, but then there are also the things that I want to do, or maybe there's been a bit of an identity shift. Maybe it's been so long between doing things that are just for you that you've forgotten what to do or what you even like anymore. And I think that's all behind what this person is asking with this question. So my top tip here is to run an experiment in extending your menu of options for what you do in your own precious time. Sometimes we need some fresh ideas, and it can be great to crowdsource this, to ask colleagues or friends about their favourite things to do. But one of the things we sometimes need to push ourselves to do is actually experiment with trying some new things. So run a little experiment for yourself. Come up with 4 things that you haven't done before, that you want to give a go, that you're going to spend a bit of time doing over the next period of time. Maybe it's 1 thing a week, each week for the next 4 weeks. You don't have to like them all. The purpose of this is it's an experiment. Are there other things out there that I'd like to try that are actually really refreshing for me? Why do other people think going op shopping is so refreshing and fun? Because it's creative and it's interesting and it's purposeful and it's a little bit relaxing, just that kind of like browsing mode without a whole lot of pressure. Or why do other people like hill walks? Maybe you have to walk to the top of that mountain to find out. But run an experiment to extend your menu of ideas. It is such a valuable thing to do every now and then. Then I think something that's important is actually writing the list of things that you can do when you do have that time on your own. So maybe there are some things that you already know you enjoy, and perhaps there are some new things that you're adding to that list. But write the menu so you're not like a possum in the headlights when you do finally get that precious time to yourself. You've actually got some ideas that are sitting there and you can choose from the list. My other tip when it comes to having some good things to do with your downtime is find a friend who also struggles with this. One of the barriers for people when they're busy with kids and a relationship is that so often they're really tired in those moments when they do get time to themselves. And they might not have a whole lot of social energy, but actually doing something alongside someone can be really nice. I've met up with a girlfriend and we've both gone for a massage together. Now, that hasn't been a whole lot of talking or interaction. It's just been, hey, do you want to go and do this with me? It sets you up some accountability. It makes an appointment that you need to keep. So just keep in mind it doesn't have to be all extroverted time if you're doing something with someone else. But think about, can you rope a friend into this? Or can you draw in some accountability around trying some new things in this space and reporting back to one another? So often in life, we're not alone in our struggles, and the other people around us are struggling with exactly the same thing. So roping someone else into this is a really good idea. The other thing, if you're struck with that paralysis around what am I going to decide to do in this moment, is you can even build yourself a little jar with a whole lot of ideas in it, and you can pull out an idea and go, okay, I'm going to go and do that thing. Now, sometimes the other thing that happens is you pull out the idea and you go, oh no, that's not what I want to do. I want to go and do this. Well, that's great as well. But sometimes having a jar or making it multi-choice or rolling a dice or somehow gamifying that can be really helpful if you're just overwhelmed. I think one of the most significant barriers when it comes to time by ourselves is freeing ourselves of judgment and guilt around that time. It can be so empowering to think about, what would I do if no one cared what I was doing? If no one was judging what I was spending, or if no one was kind of watching on and seeing the state of my house and the things that I've left undone while I've gone and done that thing for myself? What would you do if just no one was judging you? That can be such a helpful question to unlock our answers about what we most want to do. The other thing I think can be really helpful when it comes to what we do for time away from our spouse and kids is sometimes to ring fence a little bit of money towards this. That can be money for fun or for self-care or whatever it is you want to kind of earmark that for. But sometimes we think in the week-to-week realities of our finances, actually there's something else that money should go towards. Having an account that you put a small amount of money aside into that becomes your ring-fenced self-care and fun fund money can help you give yourself permission to do those things that you're wanting to do for yourself. Sometimes that's the barrier, and that's something that's worth addressing. So I hope that this has inspired you in thinking about what you might do for time away from your family. This is a really, really common struggle, and I totally get it. I've had those moments too of going, who am I anymore? What do I want to do with myself? What should I be doing? What are other people going to think about this? And I know that it just gets super overwhelming. So hopefully there are some fresh ideas from this chat today. Thank you so much for these fantastic 3 questions. The next episode of Ask Charlotte in a fortnight is still going to be on the same theme of your relationship with yourself, because I got so many great questions come through. So tune in a fortnight for another 3 questions on this theme. And thank you so much to the people who shared their questions today. I really appreciate your honesty about the things that you're struggling with and the opportunity to speak into those things that are tough. If you'd like your question answered on the next episode, head to my Instagram, the show notes, or my website. Thanks for the privilege of letting me speak into your life, and I hope you've found a few useful things to hold on to today. This has been Ask Charlotte, part of the Feel Better podcast.